We've got details of these stories plus many more coming up in the next 60 minutes. Of course, you can join us with your views, comments and suggestions on any of our top stories this hour. Visit any of our social media pages on Facebook and on Twitter. Just do well to post a comment. Now, lesbians, gay, bisexual and transgender society in Ghana is calling on the government to repeal the provision in the Criminal Offences Act which criminalizes unnatural carnal knowledge. This comes barely 2 months after President Akufo-Addo, in an interview on Al Jazeera, noted that homosexuality could be legalized in Ghana. A report by Godfred Tanam.
Why is homosexuality still illegal in your country?
I think that it is something that is bound to happen. And when that happens...
What's going to provoke it? What's going to make it happen?
Oh, it's the activity, like elsewhere in the world. Like elsewhere in the world, the activities of individuals, of groups, a certain awareness, a certain development, grew and grew and grew stronger, and it forced a change in law. I believe that those are the same of individuals, of groups, a certain awareness, a certain development, grew and grew and grew stronger, and it forced a change in law. I believe that those are the same processes that will bring about changes in our situation.
To the President of the Republic of Ghana, we urge him, as Human Rights Watch, to publicly condemn all threats and acts of violence against LGBT people, including violence that is perpetrated by family members. To the Parliament of Ghana, we urge the Parliament to repeal Section 1041B of the Criminal Offences Act that criminalizes adult consensual same-sex conduct. To the Inspector General of Police and the Ghana Police Services, we urge the police to undertake prompt, independent and effective investigations into allegations of acts of violence against LGBT people.
These are some of the demands being made by the Human Rights Watch after a 3-month research work in 4 regional capitals, namely Accra, Kumasi, Tamale and Cape Coast. According to the lesbians, gay, bisexual and transgender LGBT, having a law which criminalizes adult consensual same-sex conduct contributes to an environment whereby LGBT people are frequently victimized of violence and discrimination. The findings from the research work revealed the LGBT society in Ghana suffer widespread discrimination and abuse both in public and in family settings. While some Ghanaian officials have publicly called for an end to violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity, government is yet to repeal what they describe as a colonial-era law that criminalizes same-sex activity. The 72-page report dubbed No Choice But to Deny Who I Am, Violence and Discrimination Against LGBT People in Ghana shows how retention of Section 104 Clause 1B of the Criminal Offences Act 1960 relegates LGBT Ghanaians to effective second-class citizenship. How will the repeal of the Act therefore end victimization and discrimination against LGBT people in the country?
We are not saying that the repeal on its own is going to change things. We are saying that the government or Parliament of Ghana needs to communicate to the public through the repeal of this law to say we are removing, as the government, we are removing the one thing that we have within our power to do.
The experiences of LGBT people in society have been one of the concerns of human rights advocates. Pale, a trans man, says revealing the identity of their sexual orientation kills their spiritual survival.
It's really difficult, but I might say once it's difficult cannot stop me from being who I am or who I identify to be. Living as a trans man in Ghana is not an easy thing, even if the LBQ are facing, if I say LBQ, the lesbian, bisexual and the queer people, if they are facing challenges, then you know how it is to be a trans person and to live in Ghana.
Recommendations have therefore been made to the Presidency, Parliament, the Police Service, the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General's Department, SHRAJ and the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights.
All right, so we're going to be staying a while longer on this subject. It's a major topic for discussion on News 360 tonight. I've got my guests in the studio. I'll introduce them to you shortly. But Solace, what more do you have there?
All right, so I want to go over the particular issue that has probably brought this issue to the fore again. Now, 2 months ago, the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo conducted an interview on Al Jazeera. Now, President Nana Akufo-Addo made some conciliatory remarks regarding this issue. When he was asked why the law remained on the books, he said that he did not believe that a sufficiently strong coalition has emerged now, which is having that impact on public opinion that will say change it. So let's have a new paradigm in Ghana. Now, the Ghana Police Service has also issued some statements regarding the safety of LGBT or members of the LGBT society here in Ghana. And they're saying that it must be placed on record that the police stations throughout the country serve as safe environments or havens for LGBT persons to report cases of violence, assault, and other crimes to the police for the necessary action to be taken. Also, the Police Intelligence and Professional Standards Bureau, PIPS, is a compliant directorate of the service where the public is also at liberty to report police misconduct, like the prosecutor who probably failed to appear in court, as found by Human Rights Watch showed. Now, to the Directorate for Investigations and Quick Police Action. Now, the letter also states that going forward, the police service will adopt more proactive steps and pragmatic approaches to ensure the protection for LGBT individuals generally. So that pretty much wraps up the whole issue regarding safety and the police, and also for the fact that Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo had that interview that pretty much has, brought this issue once again to the fore.
Right. Thank you very much, Wendy Lai. I said Wendy Lai. Solace Rose Quarte for bringing us all those strands and angles to this particular developing story. Let me quickly introduce you my guest in the studio. Agoma Atambere is an activist with the Humanist Association of Ghana. Agoma, thank you very much for your time. And Wendy Isaac is the president of the Human Rights Watch. Wendy, thank you also for joining us in studio. Your name is Wendy Isaac, right?
My name is Wendy Isaac, and I'm not the president of Human Rights Watch. I am a researcher.
You're a researcher?
At Human Rights Watch.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Wendy. Let me start off with you. Are you an LGBT yourself?
I don't think that's a relevant question.
Why not?
Necessarily. I'm a human rights lawyer, an activist, and human rights defender.
You don't want to answer that question?
I do not. I don't think it's relevant.
Okay. So what informed this press conference?
So the first thing I want to say is that the connection to the president's statement is not necessarily relevant either. We started doing this research in December 2016, and we carried out the research, in-depth interviews in 4 cities in Ghana from December 2016, January 2017 into February 2017. The timing of the launch is only because the report is now ready for release, but it's not necessarily tied directly to the president's statement.
And what is striking about this report, to say?
Let's look at the purpose of why we did the research. First of all, as an international human rights organization, I must state unequivocally that we do not only work on LGBT issues. We've done a lot of work in Ghana. We've done work around child rights and mining. We've done work on disability issues in Ghana. This is our 3rd report, at least in the last 3-4 years. In Ghana, we were requested by LGBT activists, the LGBT community in Ghana, to come in and do this research. They take our work very seriously because it's very credible, it's super seriously vetted, and they thought that we would be able to produce a document that would enable them to use in advocacy interventions in Ghana.
So, you come from South Africa, where the laws are pretty much friendly on LGBT. So what you want in Ghana is for people within the LGBT society to feel empowered like they are in South Africa.
That's absolutely correct. But I want to emphasize one thing for sure. South Africa is at a completely different space compared to Ghana and compared to other countries in the world. I don't come to Ghana as a South African. I come to Ghana as and a human rights defender and a human rights activist and as a global citizen and as a feminist. What LGBT people are looking for in Ghana is measures that must be put in place by government agencies to ensure that they are protected from violence and discrimination, whether that violence is happening in the home, whether it's happening in the streets, and whether it's happening in their communities. The problem here in Ghana is that you have the specific provision in your criminal offences Act.
Unnatural carnal knowledge.
Unnatural carnal knowledge, section 1041B, which is not necessarily being implemented, right? But it creates conditions where people are fearful of reporting instances of violence because they think that they themselves will be considered criminal. So it creates a culture of impunity. I'll give you one very good example of a testimony that's included in our report. It's of a young man who was suspected of being gay in Nema, in a neighborhood here in Accra. He was brutally assaulted by a vigilante group known as Empire Safety. He reported the matter to the police. He pursued the criminal justice system to get protection. What happened with that person, unfortunately, is that the prosecutor ultimately did not appear in court. So the case was struck off the court roll. Now, what does that communicate to the LGBT people? That when you are a victim of violence, you are not worthy of protection. And that's
I'm afraid I've got to go to Agoma Agambere, who's with the Humanist Association of Ghana, is an activist. The instance he just cited is a purely criminal matter.
Yes.
Which demands prosecution.
Yes.
The repeal of unnatural carnal knowledge would not necessarily prevent people from beating other people, would it?
It may not prevent people from beating people, but it will make it easier for people to seek help. It will make them feel much more comfortable to go to the police and have their issues dealt with, and then the perpetrators prosecuted. So it is really, really important. This particular 104.1b issue is what people cling on to say, okay, homosexuality is illegal in our country, so we should be able to torture them. We should deal with these issues as human rights issues, and to protect people's rights, we should have to remove everything that are obstacles to people's freedom. So repealing this is very much important.
I'm going to ask you gentlemen to kindly hold on for me. Let me get on the phone lines now and speak to a lawyer, Moses Foh Amoaning. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. So what this gentleman are asking for is essentially a repeal of the that law of unnatural carnal knowledge in our statutes books. They're not asking too much, are they?
Well, it will not be repealed. Now, let me, it's very interesting. Is it a lady, the one from South Africa? Is she a lady?
You want to answer that?
Yes,
is she a lady?
Yes, no, I'll answer it. Yes, I am. My name is Wendy Isaac.
The interviewer asked you a very simple question, whether you were a gay or a lesbian. You say it's not relevant. Are you sure it's not relevant?
Very much, it's not relevant.
Why would it be relevant, sir?
Because clearly, from your own analysis, it was the LGBT activists who asked you to do a research. So you have actually, what you have done is to be a conduit for LGBT rights activism and their propaganda. You've just provided the basis for them to come and say that in Ghana, what we say culturally is against our culture, what we say is against our religion, what we say is against our constitution should be legalized. That's what you've done. And that's what I'm asking you. It's very relevant where you're coming from, because you have just provided the data. Although I think it's a fraudulent data. Look at this whole Ghanaian population. Your sample size is 114. Anyway, by the way, my name is Moses Foh Amoaning. We have a coalition for proper human sexual rights and family values. And very soon we will hold a colloquium. We will invite you, and we're insisting that if you can you bring all your 114 people who want to see them? Because I think this is just providing ammunition for the LGBT, and you have actually accepted it yourself. Your evidence is very clear. You're just an instrument for pushing LGBT rights propaganda. And after that, you're asking and recommending that we should change our laws. By the way, can you go to South Africa and say, do some research in the United Kingdom, in the United States, do some research also on polygamy and how people who want to marry more than one person are being, discriminated against. Now, the truth of the matter is, LGBT rights activists have always said that homosexuality, LGBT rights is a human rights matter. Wrong, 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 my dear. Look, last year, the European Human Rights Court in France, in Strasbourg, actually gave a categorical statement, legal position on this matter. And they concluded, 47 judges came to the conclusion that it's not a human rights matter at all in terms of, same-sex marriages. And it is also not a discriminatory matter. And that state parties have a right to decide whether or not they will allow, same-sex marriages or homosexuality or not. So in Ghana, it is illegal. We don't want it. So if you're in South Africa, they like it. In the United States, that's fine. That's their law.
Mr. Foh Amoaning,
discriminatory about that position.
Mr. Foh Amoaning, let me come in briefly with an intervention here. Indeed, I find your point quite crucial, the point about conducting a research involving 114 respondents in 4 capitals when we live in a country of over 20 million people. I think it's an essential one. I'm going to pose that question back to them to answer. But Mr. Foh Amoaning, my question to you, you are a lawyer.
The facts rightly. We're about 30 million, 20 years.
That's fine. That's fine. About 30 million Ghanaians. That's fine. My question to you, Mr. Moses Foh Amoaning, you are a lawyer. Don't you appreciate the concern being raised by these people that, listen, here in Ghana, we've heard, we've seen, we've reported cases of lesbians and homosexuals essentially being beaten, being brutalized in certain suburbs of the country. That purely is a criminal act which needs to be prosecuted.
Well, you're right.
And I don't think
don't glamorize this. Look, there are people in America, in the United States, in England, who want to get engaged in certain activity who are also brutalized. So let's not make this sound as if this is the first these things are happening. You're right, it's wrong. If anybody is brutalized or is hit or manhandled, that is wrong. And everybody will speak against it. But the fact of the matter, and which is what they must accept, those in your studio, that this is the Ghanaian society. And we have a sovereign country, and we don't like that. That's not the sort of behavior or conduct we want to admit. 2, it is not a human rights matter. That is false human rights. Because if having anal sex or homosexual relationships are human rights issues, okay, I want to marry a cat, I want to marry a dog, bestiality, that's also a human right. So if people in a particular Ghanaian society say, you want to have sex with a dog, you want to have sex with a cat, we don't like it in this our community, so please can you stop it? Then you say that is discrimination? I mean, look, if you're not careful, bottom line, the society is going to be, disorderly. That's why the essential fact about homosexuality is that it is inherently disorderly. Because if you accept it, then everything else goes out of the window. I can decide I want to marry my aunt, I can marry my father, I can marry my cousin, and incest. People can also gather around and say, if I want to marry my sister, I also have a human right.
Mr. Foh Amoaning, please hold on to me. Mr. Foh Amoaning, please.
10 minutes. If you can hear me out. I'm trying to make the argument that there are false human rights that are being thrown around by, LGBT rights activists who've got money, and they are funding these sort of research that which are being published and which you are picking up and following.
Mr. Foh Amoaning, please hold on to me.
But that's exactly what they did. So you've got to allow me time to go through the details and expose these things.
I'm going to allow you some time by kindly listening to me when I come in. I beg you, please just hold on for me. Hold on, I'll come back to you. Wendy, there was a very crucial question which Moses Foh Amoaning posed, which I thought was quite interesting, about the fact that you do a research involving 114 respondents in 4 capitals of Ghana, and we are a nation of nearly 30 million people. I mean, how that's unfair.
Are you suggesting that I should have interviewed a couple of million people instead? Let me try to answer your question very, very, very briskly. First of all, we're not looking at quantitative data here. Our methodology is we do research, we establish patterns of abuse or violations, right? Or violations. We conducted this research in these 4 cities because that is where LGBT Ghanaians
but if you speak to the LGBT
No. Let me please finish. You must even the lawyer who was on the phone must understand this. I did not only speak to LGBT Ghanaians. I spoke to one human rights organization, mainstream human rights group. I had an interview with the Commissioner of Police of Ghana. I interviewed the complaints officer of the Ghana Human Rights Commission and Administrative Justice. All of these confirmatory statements or testimonies that I got from these other entities confirmed what I had heard from LGBT Ghanaians. Number two, on the point of this is not a human rights issue, I want to remind the lawyer on the phone that when your delegation, your official delegation to the United Nations was speaking at an event at the Human Rights Council in September 2016, and this information is in the report, the delegate said, number one, there is, of course, the need to respect Ghanaian culture and tradition. However, LGBT people in Ghana are protected by law, protected from violence and from discrimination.
Right.
This is an official record of the Ghanaian delegation in Geneva.
Right. Mr. Foh Mr. Foh, hold on for me. Mr. Foh, please hold on for me. Mr. Foh, please hold on for me.
These people come and repeat these matters here in Ghana, and then I will wish that you will also take a record of the reaction of Ghanaians. You know, I wish you could also do, well, we also have a coalition. Come and talk to us, because we're going to have a colloquium and we will invite you, because you're suggesting that the position which these Ghanaians raised at the United Nations represents the views of Ghanaians. I'm saying that no. They are false. They don't represent the views of Ghanaians in any way. In fact, we have a commission which was set up in Ghana to review the constitution. And go and read the report. The report says that one of the issues that most Ghanaians, spoke effectively and vehemently and passionately about was that they were against legalizing homosexual rights. Go and read that report. That is more representative of the views of Ghanaians than a couple of people who go to New York and for their own benefit will try and pretend that Ghanaian law protects homosexuals.
Mr. Foh, how do you reconcile your position with Article 17.2 of the Constitution, which essentially speaks against discrimination of any form, gender, race, color? How do you reconcile that position?
Well, it's good you're quoting the law, because it says gender, race, sex, color, religion. It never talks about sexual orientation, which is the language that the lady knows is used technically to represent sexual preferences. Does it use those words? You read your constitution. Is it there? Do you see it over there? Of course it's not. The Ghanaian constitution never recognizes sexual orientation. It talks about sex. And you and I know that when we talk about sex, it's male and female. All right, so don't confuse all of us about the constitutional provision. And I'm saying that this is the position of the law. In South Africa, it's different. But in Ghana, that's our constitution. And the criminal, I heard one of your people say that, oh, it's a colonial inheritance, so we should push it away. Sorry, my dear, what is colonial is the strategy by Western European countries and organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to try and voice what is the Western European cultural, moral, degenerate view of sexuality on Africans. Because I ask you the counter question. Why is it that the Human Rights Watch does not conduct research into the way people in the United States and in the UK who want to engage in polygamy have been maltreated? Indeed, from tomorrow, I will bring you a letter from the coalition. We want you to conduct a research into that effect, and we will pay for it. I want you to do that.
I would appreciate that, Mr. Foh. I would appreciate that very much. But I dare ask, don't you think that your position is a purely emotional one? It's a purely emotional one that is grounded on morality.
Oh, mine is emotional. People who say that men should be allowed to marry men is not emotional. There you go again. What it's about.
And possibly grounded on morality.
Let me ask you a question. If you say it's emotional, let me give you the facts, the scientific facts. Now, the Human Genome Project was conducted over 30 to 40 years, right, by scientists from over 200 countries. They identified 26,170 genes that control human beings. They didn't find one single gene that push anybody to be homosexual. Now you respond to that. Tell me I'm being emotional. Respond to that.
My very final question to you, Mr. Foh Amoaning.
No, you respond to that, my brother, because you said I was emotional. Respond to it. If you're an interviewer and you are in this country, you've got to be fair. Because
Mr. Foh Amoaning,
also been paid
Mr.
to
Foh
be part
Amoaning,
of the propaganda.
Mr. Foh Amoaning, hold on. Mr. Foh Amoaning, hold on.
I'm being emotional.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You should have listened. No.
That's what you said.
No, you should have listened. You should have listened. Mr. Foh Amoaning, would you allow me to ask my question, sir? Please, would you allow me to ask my question?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You accused me of being emotional.
No. Please.
Then withdraw that word.
No, you should. No. Mr. Foh Amoaning.
And at the end of the day, you're prejudicing the discussion. So
Mr. Foh Amoaning, you should have listened into me while I asked my question. I asked that, don't you think you are being emotional considering that your arguments are grounded on morality? I didn't say that you were being emotional. So please, just listen to me. Just listen to me. I'm going to go on to ask my final question, if you'd mind. If you don't mind, I'll just ask my final question. Now, they're asking for a repeal of this particular provision in our statute books. Are the Supreme Court judges going to consider culture or human rights when considering this argument?
First of all, I don't think you've been very fair to me. You called me on your program to respond. Now you start a question by inferring that I'm being emotional. That's a suggestion. That's a very suggestive question. And I'm talking like a broadcaster who's been doing this for over 40 years. So you can't school me in this matter. And all Ghanaians and your viewers are listening to you. If you start a question by saying, aren't you being emotional? That is very suggestive. That's not very good journalism. And you complete yourself. Now, let me respond to your question. You are saying that, will the Supreme Court consider, what's it called, culture? Is that your question? Ask it again.
Yes, I was asking that if the Supreme Court judges are to consider their arguments, are they going to consider the human rights aspect of it or purely the culture?
To be honest with you, we'll be willing to join issues on this matter in the Supreme Court. I would be so happy if they could go to the Supreme Court and challenge the fact that the law is unconstitutional. I would be so happy because the Supreme Court will look at a lot of things. And I told you right from the beginning that the European Human Rights Court, in a very fundamental and bone-shaking judgment delivered late last year, has ruled that this is the European Human Rights Court based in Strasbourg in France. The issue at stake was whether or not there was a fundamental human right vested in individuals to have same-sex marriages in the country. Now, all the 47 judges considered theological matters, anthropological matters, all the evidence, including positive law, and came to the conclusion that there was no human rights vested in somebody to maintain same-sex marriages, and that the issue of discrimination does not even exist at all. That's the holding of the European Human Rights Court, European Court on Human Rights. So the Ghanaian courts, of course, will look at all the matters, but I'm confident that they will come to the conclusion that homosexuality is against Ghanaian customary law. And by the way, Ghanaian customary law is also guaranteed under our constitution. This researcher, let him go to all the communities. In fact, he can even select 2 communities in Ghana. I can point him to Osu and Mamprobi. He can go there, even the vicinity around you, and find out whether there's a single Ghanaian customary community who approve of same-sex marriages. Then he can do that research and find out. So I am confident that if it comes for consideration before the Supreme Court of Ghana, it won't take them very long to rule that this is something which is abhorrent, it is something that we culturally don't allow, and legally it is improper in Ghana as well.
Some would say you have no sympathies for these groups of people at all.
My brother, let me share something with you. Our coalition, the National Coalition for Proper Human Rights and Sexual Values, our theme, our tagline is winning with the love and care of God and Allah. We're going around all the schools in Ghana. We're talking to our young people. Look, I see people who, go to the medical centers. People who are wearing pampers because of their sphincter muscle in their anus has been destroyed. I wish that lady would do that research as well. People who are being psychologically destroyed in school because they have been drawn into these things. Many homes, go to the courts in Ghana, the divorce rate. Lots of divorces happening because people can't relate with their husbands because they did supi in the secondary schools. I go to the schools constantly. We talk to them. We help them. I'm pumping money. We're praying with them. And trust me, that's what is working. So don't school me on me not having sympathy. Once again, you're being very, pejorative in the way you are, conducting your interview. But that's fine. That's your choice. But your listeners are listening to you.
I appreciate your time, Moses Foh Amoaning. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. He says I'm being unfair to him. I'm sure you can all judge for yourselves. Let me just quickly conclude on this. Atambiri and Wendy. Wendy, are you a female?
Yes, I am. Again, that's not necessarily relevant, but I am. Yes.
You're a female?
Yes,
okay.
yes,
all right.
correct.
So just quickly, let's wrap up on this.
Let's wrap up on this. I mean, there are a couple of things. I think it's really unfortunate that your guest clearly had not read our report, neither had he read the press release, because what he's done in his interview, in his conversation with your guest, is to conflate what we are talking about, which is violence and discrimination, with same-sex marriage. We are not, in this report, talking about same-sex marriage. LGBT people in Ghana are not talking about same-sex marriage. That is not on their agenda. LGBT people in Ghana are asking for intervention by state agencies to protect them from violence. Again, he's citing, one last point, he's citing the ruling of the European Court. I wish he would take the time to actually read instruments and treaties that have come out of the African human rights system. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which sits in the Gambia, the primary human rights mechanism of the African continent, issued a resolution in 2014 which expressly stated that every single African country, including Ghana, has a responsibility, in fact, a legal obligation to ensure that no one is subjected to violence on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity.
I'm going to quickly be going to Solace Rose Quarte to tell us what people have been saying, because we've put this matter out there to, hear what people say, what the Ghanaian community makes of your call. But quickly to wrap up on you and what you're saying, I mean, you are asking the Inspector General of Police to direct the judiciary to make this repeal. I mean, how so? How do you expect the IGP to actually direct the judiciary to do this?
I don't know where you're getting that from, but what's more important for me, that I want to talk about, is what Mr. Moses Foh said.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
He should understand that when we say freedom and justice, we mean it, all right? These people he's talking about are Ghanaian just like him. They are my people, they are his people, they are our people. And we don't want them hurt. And that is something that we should all seek to protect. Whether he's Christian or Muslim, we all agree that we should love each other and we should be there for each other. So if these people are hurting and we come to talk about it to get them help, and he's saying, no, this is bad, I don't get the morality, so-called morality he's talking about here. So we should protect these people, not go about talking about LGBT rights. That is not what people were talking about. We are talking about the violence here. Nobody talked about LGBT rights or marriage or any other thing. Or we didn't even talk about like sex or any other thing that he was talking about.
You talking about
we're just talking about
and the respect for people's human rights.
That is all that this report is about.
Thank you very much, Agomo Atambiri. He's an activist with the Humanist Association of Ghana, and Wendy Isaac, also a researcher. Solace?
All right, so basically we're supposed to read the comments from Facebook. Unfortunately, we can't because they're a little harsh, but we would like to let our viewers know that we have taken note of the comments and that we basically taken note. But then we will be going on a quick break. We'll be right back with more.